Imagine for a moment you're a mother, father, or even a child. You live in a small rural village in India. Life, though simple, is challenging. But one day, a health crisis hits, a sudden illness, a life threatening condition. The first question is not where will I get myself treated, but how will I pay for it? And this is not the story of a single child or a single family. This is the story of millions and millions of Indians facing a health crisis every single day. Now, imagine another reality wherein no family has to sell their land, has to take a huge sum of money on debt. They don't have to sell their livestock. They don't have to do any of this just to survive. Imagine a system that ensures every individual, no matter what their income is, no matter what their status is, they can access quality healthcare without being crippled by cost. This is the vision of the Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. But today, as we reflect on this groundbreaking initiative, we must ask ourselves, is this enough? Can a health insurance scheme truly transform the health landscape of a country? And more importantly, are we solving the deep rooted healthcare problems that make healthcare unaffordable and inaccessible for millions and millions of people? I think it is time now not to think of the immediate successes, but look for a future where healthcare is not just a policy, it's not just a textbook right, but truly something more universal for the rich, for the poor, for the urban, for the rural. Because in the end, the health of a nation is its true wealth. And the vision of a healthier, more equitable country lies at the heart of this scheme. Ladies and gentlemen, this is What a Week, your weekly current affairs roundup, doing a 360-degree on a contemporary issue, giving you closure because no one else will. For those of you who are preparing for the civil services, this particular topic correlates to a topic called health, which is explicitly mentioned in GS paper 2. Not only this, the way this scheme is implemented also can be used as a case study in a larger answer on federalism. Furthermore, this particular scheme can also be used as an excellent mechanism to emancipate vulnerable sections, which are cross referenced both in GS paper 2 and GS paper 1. And finally, the separation of powers between GS paper 2 and GS paper 3 are non existent these days. And health is often asked as a question in GS paper 3. And if that's the case, the scheme could also be useful there. Now, through the course of this particular presentation, I would be addressing it in the following manner. The first question: why do we even need a national health insurance program? Thereafter, question number 2, I will focus on a thematic analysis of the scheme. I'd be talking to you about A, the beneficiaries, B, the benefits given to the beneficiaries, C, the larger issues of its implementation and corruption, D, the larger problem with adoption, and finally, the financial aspect of this particular scheme. And thereafter, we'll conclude with the way forward. Why a national health insurance program like Ayushman Bharat. See, India faces a significant health challenge. Nearly 60 million people are pushed into poverty on a yearly basis because of catastrophic health expenses. The out of pocket expenses for healthcare in India is one of the highest in the world. People in India pay 62% of their incomes on healthcare, barely leaving anything for other avenues. The Ayushman Bharat Jan Arogya Yojana was launched in 2018 to reduce this particular burden so that you would have financial risk protection to poor and vulnerable populations. And by doing this, you achieve a goal sanctioned by the very Sustainable Development Goal framework, which is universal healthcare. It is to be considered one of India's most prominent steps towards achieving universalization of healthcare so that healthcare is accessible to citizens without financial hardship. And this idea of a government sponsored health insurance program is not new to this country. We've done this before. We've had something called the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which used to give about 30,000 rupees per family on a yearly basis, and the family could consist of a maximum of 5 people. Because of this, a very large chunk of the population remained unaddressed. The Ayushman Bharat scheme looks to expand this, provide larger access to larger populations by one, increasing the coverage from 30,000 to 5 lakh per family on a yearly basis, and two, removing the cap of a 5 member family. But the larger goal is larger than these numbers. It is to reduce healthcare related impoverishment. It is to ensure access to quality healthcare. And above all, to promote health equity. Today, the Ayushman Bharat is the world's largest state sponsored health insurance program. And very recently, the elderly population in India above the age of 70 has been given complete access to Ayushman Bharat irrespective of any criteria, trying to achieve universalization of healthcare without any ifs and buts for the elders of our country. The beneficiaries. The eligibility criteria for this scheme is based on the socio-economic caste census data of 2011. Because of this, the scheme targets about 40% of the Indian population. This means 60 crore individuals or about 12.34 crore households. Now, which household has to be selected as a beneficiary is based on certain deprivation criteria separate for urban and rural counterparts. From the rural counterparts' point of view, the criteria includes parameters such as those households who don't have a proper house, those households that don't have an adult earning member, and even those households which rely on manual labor to sustain themselves. On the urban front, households which are indulged in occupations such as rag picking, who are street vendors, domestic workers, and laborers, are included within this scheme. After the scheme's launch, much later, 37 lakh ASHA workers, who are the spinal cord of India's primary healthcare ecosystem, were included. And very recently, the scheme has been unconditionally extended to adults above the age of 70, the elderly population in our country. So, where is the issue with identifying beneficiaries? It's always about the data. The 2011 database that is used is generally understood to be outdated. a larger number of families are today in a far worse condition. And not to forget, India, along with the world, has survived the pandemic. And the pandemic has pushed even more people into a state of depravity. So the larger question is, how do we improve this? The obvious answer is one, update the SECC database. Second, to get more and more people aware of this program. A national survey indicated that only 57 odd percent of the Indian population was aware of a scheme like this. This requires universal understanding so that universal healthcare today becomes a reality. And the third, and to my mind, the most important area of improving the scheme is the forgotten middle class. The lower middle class families who either don't qualify because they're not poor enough or they're not rich enough to afford private insurance. What can be done is a voluntary, low cost insurance offering that ensures India's forgotten middle class also has health access. Benefits. The beneficiaries of this scheme are entitled to a health cover of 5 lakh per family on a yearly basis. This is for secondary and tertiary care hospitalization. This means this scheme is not for the primary healthcare ecosystem. Not only this, through this scheme, a total of 1,949 procedures are covered. These procedures could include surgeries, critical treatments, and treatments for severe diseases. This scheme also comes with a portability feature, which means the beneficiaries of this scheme can access hospitals which are impaneled under this scheme throughout the length and breadth of this country. While I was recording this video, the data showed very promising results. A total of 35 crore 60 lakh plus Ayushman cards have been issued. A total of 6 crore 86 lakh hospital admissions have been undertaken, and a total of 30,950 hospitals across this country are impaneled under this scheme. So the scheme can truly be a game changer. But this scheme and the benefits that come with it have their own challenges. First, the scheme categorically does not cover outpatient care. It also does not cover diagnostic services. It also does not cater to long term clinical treatments. And these actually account for 40 to 80% of our healthcare costs, and specifically for the elderly. The private hospitals which are impaneled under this scheme often delay or refuse treatment because of low reimbursement rates. And if the rates are not low, the disbursement cycle, like how the government repays most of its contracts, tends to be fairly slow. And while hospitalization is covered, the scheme certainly lacks support for medicines and follow up care. And without medicines, true recovery is a distant possibility. And this is an essential ingredient for people who are diseased. So, how do we make the benefits better? There are some obvious solutions. One, expand the scheme to cover outpatient services, diagnostic tests, and in fact, medications. This would significantly reduce out of pocket expenditures, especially for chronic illnesses. Second, increase reimbursement rates. This will make sure that the private hospitals have an incentive and are encouraged to deliver quality healthcare. And three, the larger revision on a periodic basis of the health benefit package. Of late, our national newspapers have been suggesting that persons with disabilities should also be given unconditional access to this scheme like our nation's elderly have. And I've been able to know this because I use the CA tracker to track contemporary developments. Understanding the implementation angle. The Ayushman Bharat Jan Arogya scheme can be implemented in three ways. The first is the trust model. Now, what happens under this trust model is that the states set up an independent trust to manage and disperse the funds. In this model, the state is directly responsible for paying hospitals after the claims are processed. This is the largest used model. 22 states in India, covering 59.7% of the households, use the trust model. The second way to do this is an insurance model. This is an outsourcing model. Under this model, the state governments outsource the management of the scheme to an insurance company. It could be a private company, it could be a government company that handles the processing, the management, and the dispersal of claims. About 8 states use this model. And through this model, about 18.9% of the beneficiaries tend to be covered. And the third model is the hybrid model, wherein there is a combination of trust and insurance aspects, where a portion of the claims are managed by the state managed fund, while another portion is managed by an insurance company. Only 3 states use this specific model, and it covers just about 21.4% of the beneficiaries. And you have set up an authority called the National Health Authority under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, who's responsible for the coordination and the governance of the scheme at a national level. At the state level, this scheme is coordinated by state level health agencies to implement the scheme. And to support the state level health agencies, we of course have a district administration. Now, to understand how can implementation be better, a scheme is as good as its implementation. We require stricter monitoring and implementation measures. We require stricter audits and stricter penalties for non compliance of certain schemes. There have been very infamous instances acknowledged by the government of fraudulent claims processed by hospitals, which therefore leads me to the corruption issue. Now, several instances of corruption have been reported. So, how does corruption happen in this ecosystem? Overbilling, unnecessary hospitalizations, and fake beneficiaries. When this happens, it reduces the financial sustainability of the scheme and prevents the people who really need it to get the benefits that they should, which is why a stricter mechanism is required. Adoption. Adoption has to be understood on two fronts, one on the legal aspect, and second on the intensity aspect. As far as the legal aspect is concerned, health has always been in the state list, and that gives the states functional autonomy over health as a subject. While some states, as Rajasthan, have taken great steps in ensuring right to health, Ayushman Bharat as a national program is not nationally implemented. While 33 states and union territories have implemented it, there are regions like Odisha, West Bengal, and Delhi who have chosen to not do so. Now, they may have local versions of their own, but still, it's not a nationally synchronous idea. While this can happen because of political differences, yet the universalization of Ayushman Bharat still continues to be a challenge. On the intensity front, the sheer number of hospitals, which determines the density of healthcare institutions, continues to remain a challenge. And unless we solve these two issues, it is going to be a difficult climb. Finances. The Ayushman Bharat scheme is a centrally sponsored scheme and a core one at that. This means The center and the states divide the costs of the scheme in the ratio of 60 is to 40, where the center bears 60% of the costs. 40% of the costs are actually borne by the state governments. Now, the cost per family in India under this scheme is about 5 lakhs on a yearly basis. If you total this up, the scheme actually costed a staggering 53,350 crores in the last fiscal year. And last year, we were able to achieve around 4.5 crore hospitalizations. So that means there are going to be some challenges with respect to finances. First, and this is perhaps the most important, the amount of money we spend on healthcare. The current level of public healthcare spending in India is less than 1.5%. Our very own National Health Policy of 2017 and the World Health Organization and the World Bank all have recommended a minimum 2.5% of our GDP to be spent on healthcare. And this is a major gap. Two, the states in India spend more on healthcare than the center. And the states, more often than not, are not financially very flamboyant. And three, while 25% of the hospital admissions do happen in government hospitals, a larger chunk of expenditure is actually directed towards private hospitals, which means in healthcare in general, the private sector cannot be ignored. So, how do we solve these funding challenges? One, you will have to increase the amount of money you spend as a proportion of your GDP on healthcare. Two, the reliance on the government owned healthcare system has to be increased. And at the end of the day, if lesser people fall ill, lesser people are hospitalized. There's a lesser burden on healthcare. And we have to strengthen our primary healthcare ecosystem. Three, we have to regularly revise our reimbursement rates. And fourth, technology driven, very high intensive fraud detection mechanisms. And a question that still remains unanswered is what happens when states don't pay their share of premiums? This has happened before. The previous scheme, the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, had several instances where the states simply didn't pay up. So, yes, there are challenges that will have to be solved. As we stand at the crossroads of healthcare reform, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana represents more than just a policy. It symbolizes hope. Hope for millions who for long have lived in the fear of medical expenses. Hope for a future where no Indian has to choose between life saving treatment and medical ruin. And hope for a nation that truly understands that health is not a privilege but a fundamental right. In the end, this scheme is more than just numbers or statistics. It's about the lives saved, the families protected, and a future where every Indian can live without the fear of healthcare expenses. Bear in mind, the success of this scheme will not be measured by policies alone, but the countless life it transforms. So, as we move forward, let us remember a healthier India is a stronger India. Thank you.